Hi, and welcome to Talking Wildfire with Michael Hill. Today I'm here with my friend Bob, and Bob is a collector and he's also an author. And we've got a really interesting subject that we're going to delve into today. And this is about smoke jumpers and a period of their time in the past when they had big adventures working with the CIA and Southeast Asia. That time now is long gone, but the artifacts that are left behind are really interesting, and the story, I believe, is really interesting. And Bob, can you tell us a little bit about your background and your interest in aviation and some of your books that you've written?
Growing up, my father was in aviation. He worked at Lockheed in the Advanced Development Projects Division, which did a lot of the top fighter aircraft and reconnaissance aircraft. He could never talk about what he was doing, so that might have even stimulated my interest even more. I wanted to fly, but I couldn't pass the FAA physical, which is actually fairly easy. So life gave me other opportunities to delve into history and aviation, which both subjects which I really love. I got into collecting blood chits, which are generally fabric with a message written in different foreign languages where aviator or special forces or anyone might be caught behind enemy lines, explaining who they are and offering a reward if they can be helped back to friendly forces.
Bob, how old were you when you started collecting those?
I was actually fairly old. I was probably in my early 50s,
Okay.
1980s.
What did you learn about them collecting? I know you had a lot of them and you wrote a really big book. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
I did a lot of research. When I first picked up a blood chit, I wrote to museums and asked about them, and they all said, "We don't know anything about this, but if you find out, let us know." That piqued my interest. I did probably 15 years of research. So I had a file cabinet full of research, and I had a world-class collection. And my wife says, "What are you going to do with all this stuff? Why don't you write a book?" So I wrote a book. So it's a definitive story of blood chits from the very first one that George Washington wrote by hand for a French balloonist who didn't speak English, all the way to the end of World War II. That's as far as it goes.
Bob, if someone wanted to get a copy of your book about blood chits, because it does sound really interesting, what's the name of it? How could they find it?
The book is called Last Hope, The Blood Chit Story. It's available on Amazon and pretty much anywhere. There's a great website called Bookfinder, and you just type in the name of a book and it'll give you tons of options where to find it.
Can you tell us about, I know you wrote another book too. What was that?
Well, collecting blood chits, which is part of Escape and Evasion, I collected a lot of artifacts for Escape and Evasion. This was part of the same story. In 2013, I had an exhibit, a 3-month exhibit I curated at the Fraser History Museum in Louisville, Kentucky, which was the story of evasion and escape aids of World War II. So that book uses photographs of all the artifacts and kind of tells a story of the agencies that made them and how they were used. So I kind of discovered along the way that what I like is using physical things like artifacts to tell a story, to introduce people to something new. I mean, it's basically why people go to museums, but there aren't museums for the things that I'm interested in.
I know you've also, at some point, you moved in your collecting from World War II to the Southeast Asia era with Laos. Can you tell us a little bit about that, how you got interested in that, and just a little bit about the story of Laos?
2 aspects to being interested in Laos. The first was my dad talking about working. Some of the airplanes they built were built for the CIA. So that was real interesting to me. And then the second, I learned later that was connected to Laos. The second was in 2005, my wife, who was a textile artist, signed up for a trip to Laos to visit ethnic textile makers and Lao textile makers. And we, in our younger days, we worked with Native Americans and lived with them. In fact, I'm going to go back and visit some people in a couple months. So I tagged along on that textile trip because I was interested in the ethnic people. And as luck would have it, a lot of my life seems to be just serendipity. Things happen, and they happen at the right time. One of the women in charge of the tour, had been in Laos during the war. Her husband worked for Ambassador Sullivan at the embassy in Vientiane. And when I noticed certain ethnic people were treated differently than others, I asked her if she could explain that. And she was very diplomatic, since we had Lao interpreters, and she didn't want to upset the boat, but she got the message to me that it was because they were on the opposite side that won the war, and they were being treated differently. So I came home, I read, that piqued my interest, so I read a lot. Went back in 2007, we took another tour with the same people. But before that, my wife and I went different places on our own. And we went during the Lao New Year. the Hmong New Year. So we landed in Shanghai, and the plane was rushed by people waiting. They burst out of the building and rushed the airplane. And it turned out it's because these were Hmong from the United States visiting Laos, visiting their relatives. So that was very touching. And then waiting to leave from the same airport, I sat next to a Hmong woman from Wisconsin who was in tears. Her son had brought her to see her in-laws. I don't want to get choked up over this, but it's the first time she'd seen them since the war, and she was in her 70s, and she said she would never see them again. So,
wow.
I can't put into words how that made me feel. And I came home and I thought to myself, maybe, I can do something that I did with blood chits to try to help people learn about something. I mean, this thing in Laos was secret the whole time. What could I do? Only thing I know was writing and collecting. So I decided to see what I could find, if there were any artifacts from the war that I could put together and maybe put together displays to show people. So that's how I got into that.
Yeah, I've traveled a lot in Laos also, and such a fascinating place. I can see why it touched you. It really touched me also when I was there, and I did see the connection to Native Americans also. And Bob, can you tell us a little bit about how you actually got into collecting in the first place? How did it happen?
I had been kicking this around in my mind for quite a while. And this collection of items from Gordon V. Smith, who was a pilot with quite a history in Asia. He flew with CNAC in China, then Civil Air Transport, then Air America. Then he went to Taiwan and worked with the 34th Squadron, which was flying these clandestine overflights over China. Then he went back with Air America and then ended with ICCS, Air America ICCS. So that was kind of a point for me, should I really get into this or not? So I bought that collection and just been adding ever since.
What was in that collection?
So his CNAC wings, that's the China National Aviation Corporation. It was post-war. Well, it was during the war, but it existed post-war. It ended up going with Red China, so that's when he went with CAT, which left China with the nationalists. His CAT wing, CAT hat badge, Air America hat badges, wings, just a lot of that. You'll see it when I show the collection.
Did he die? Is that why it came on the market, or what happened?
Yes, he died.
Yeah.
Also, but University of Texas has a lot of information on Air America, and I got an oral interview with him that I transcribed. So it's very, so I have, it's really nice to hear him tell his own story. The only thing missing is this logbook.
That's interesting. I have a lot of friends that are Air America, and I always enjoy talking to them too. And it's what a time period. And I know that you also have quite a few items in your collection about Air America, and you can tell a story with that. Can you tell us a little bit about your collection, the bigger collection, and tell us the story of it? Bob, can you give us a tour of some of the items in your collection connected to the story of Laos and the story of the CIA? And this also ties into the Smokejumper story. Yeah, can you share that with us, please?
Okay. I'd like to start with an introduction to Laos itself. That's the first item that I put up in a display. The Kingdom of Laos was given self-rule in 1947 as part of the French Union. The 1954 Geneva Conference established Laotian neutrality, and foreign military forces were forced to leave Laos. The U.S. military withdrew, but the People's Army of Vietnam continued to operate. In 1916, the Laos Civil War broke out between the Royal Lao Army and the Soviet Union-backed Pathet Lao. In 1968, the North Vietnamese launched a multi-division attack to help the Pathet Lao that resulted in the Royal Lao Army largely demobilizing, leaving the conflict to irregular forces raised by the United States and Thailand under the direction of the CIA. That's how this became called the Secret War. So this flag is an original flag from the Kingdom of Laos, wartime flag. On the left is a block of the Royal Lao Army shoulder sleeve insignia. And at the right is a Palace Guard hat badge made in Paris. And above it is a depiction of the hat badge bigger so you can actually see what it is.
Bob, why are these items important to you?
I guess I'm just a sucker for museums and seeing and touching things to help me understand a story. And I kind of hope that's what other people will get out of this. I don't want, me, I don't want this to be about me. This is really about telling this story and hoping people will find a connection and go out and do their own research.
I feel the same. I like touching the items too, and having a connection to history in that time period and the place. Can you tell us more about your collection? Yeah, we're looking forward to seeing more.
Okay, second picture which is Air Lao. Lao already had commercial aviation when we got there. In 1952, Air Lao was created as a Franco-Laotian company. And in 1954, the end of the First Indochina War, the Lao government granted Air Lao the status of a national airline. It really wasn't involved in the war, but it did operate the only navigation aid in Laos at the airport at Vientiane. And much to the frustration of the Americans when they got there, it only operated it when it felt like it. It was not responsive to other people. So I like to just add that in at the beginning. This is artifacts from Civil Air Transport, nicknamed CAT. It was formed in China in 1946 by Claire Lee Chennault, who was who formed the Flying Tigers during the war. And it transported the nationalist Chinese troops and supplies during the Chinese Civil War against the communists. CAT took part in the evacuation of the nationalists to Formosa and began flying missions for the CIA in October 1949. Then in 1950, the U.S. government formed a holding company, which formed a subsidiary, CAT Incorporated, which bought 40% of CAT. American staff pilots and mechanics moved to CAT Incorporated, which was now at the disposal of the CIA. The first U.S. involvement in Laos came in 1953 during the First Indochina War, during Operation Squaw, when CAT airdropped supplies to French forces in Nha Sam, Laos. In 1954, 24 CAT pilots flew USAF airplanes in French Air Force markings and dropped supplies during the Battle of Dien Bien Phu, which pretty much everybody knows was where the French got beat and kicked out of Indochina. 2 CAT pilots, James B. McGovern Jr. and Wallace Buford, were killed in action, the first American aviator casualties of the Indochina Wars. In July 1955, CAT delivered 1,000 tons of emergency food to Laos. CAT presence in Laos became permanent in 1957. In 1959, CAT became Air America. So let's look at the artifacts.
Bob, where do you get these items from when you in your collection? How do you come about them? I rarely see these things on the market. How do you get them? If you don't want to talk about it, it's okay. Yeah.
I've been collecting things since the 1980s. So there's a network of people. I get most of my things now from people who know what I collect. We kind of help each other out. But there are big collector shows. I met you at the big collector show in February in Louisville, Kentucky. It's the world's biggest military collectors show in the world. So anyone interested in collecting, I would say go to these shows, meet people, talk to people, let them know what you collect. And, eBay is also a place to buy at auctions. Personal collections really, when you're getting into stuff like this, it's so hard to find. Personal collections make all the difference.
Thanks, Bob. Yeah, can you show us some more of your collection?
Okay, well, this is the top. In the beginning, the insignia for CAT were all brass. So the upper left corner is an enameled brass hat badge that belonged to Gordon Smith that I talked about earlier. Next to that, at the top, Captain Wing belonged to Donald R. Carver. I'd like to give the names of the Air America or the CAT people who had these because I just don't like showing things that if I know who it belonged to, I'd like to name them. Below that is a first officer wing of came from Stephen J. Zollner. On the right at the top, Captain Wing. This is Gordon V. Smith's Goldfield Captain Wing. Below that's Air Crew Wing from J.L. Madison. On the bottom left these are collar insignia, brass, and at the right are 3 tunic buttons. Next photo, which is the silver insignia for CAT. Later insignia were silver or nickel plated. On the left is a hat badge, nickel plated. unattributed, captain wing in silver. This cat wing has been made into an Air America wing by applying the Air America shield over the cat shield on the front. So I'm showing the back of the wing so you can see clearly that it was a cat silver wing. On the right are 3 tunic buttons that belong to Frederick A. Gray. Below, on the left below the wing, is a cuff button, tunic cuff button, and on the right below the wing are buttons for the Pete's cap, belonged to Donald R. Carver. In the center is a cat employee ID card belonging to Dolores A. Crane. To the left is a perpetual calendar. Now, I don't know if this was a passenger perk or if employees got this as well. It could have been both. It's a perpetual calendar that actually lasted until 2015. On the right is a cigarette lighter, cat cigarette lighter, which could also be for passengers. Next, I'm going to talk about the U.S. Embassy and the Defense Attaché Office, because that's where the secret war was actually run from. In May 1961, President Kennedy directed that the ambassador to Laos would be the de facto military commander in Laos. This is because U.S. troops had withdrawn from the country. The U.S. Embassy in Vientiane found itself in charge of the secret war. Working within the Defense Attaché Office at the Embassy in Vientiane, the Air Attaché basically directed the air war with a broad brush, which in Laos was primarily the use of tactical air as airborne artillery. The top item in here is just a modern image for context only. Finding anything at all to do with the embassy is exceedingly difficult. So what I did manage to find is the bottom image. This is a wartime silver gelatin print of a North American T-28. It was transferred to Laos in 1969. It was maintained by Air America in Udon, Thailand, but flown under the command of the Air Attaché at the embassy in Vientiane. It was reportedly lost in Laos on 14 September 1972.
Bob, do you have anything else connected to the embassy in Laos at that time period?
I do have one more item that I just got a couple months ago. It's this is a woman's party jacket. This is a party jacket, which is a kind of something made just for social occasions. It's not a uniform. It's just for people to have fun with. This belonged to a woman, unknown name, called herself Tigress, as you could see on the top. But of interest to me, it has a patch, not an official patch, but one made in a Thai tailor shop for the Defense Attaché Office in the embassy in Vientiane. So that's a connection. Probably not official, but it's this is the only one of these patches I've ever seen. It's been around. A lot of collectors know about it, and I was fortunate enough to find it earlier this year.
Why is the Defense Attaché Office connected to the story of the CIA and Laos in that time period?
95% of the war was run by the Air Attaché there at the Defense Attaché Office. 5% of the war was run by the Army Attaché there. These are the U.S. people that actually ran the war.
I didn't know that. That's interesting.
Now I'm going to go to Air America. Air America was probably the biggest U.S. presence in Laos during the war. CAT, which I've already shown, became Air America in 1959. They operated throughout Asia, but they're best known for their clandestine operations in Laos. As early as 1959, U.S. Special Forces were training with Lao troops in Project Hotfoot. In 1961, President Kennedy had U.S. Marines prepare a huge base for Air America at Udon, Thailand. In 1962, 14 countries signed an international agreement on the neutrality of Laos. The agreement called for foreign military forces to leave Laos. The U.S. complied, but the People's Army of Vietnam remained in Laos, and rather than abandon Laos to the communists, America initiated covert military operations. Air America provided logistical support for the secret war that under normal circumstances would have fallen on military resources. When supplying one of the landing sites on Phu Pati in northern Laos in January 1968, an Air America helicopter delivering supplies found 2 Russian AN-2 Colt biplanes bombing the site. Pilot Ted Moore maneuvered alongside one of the Colts, and flight mechanic Glenn Woods shot the airplane down with his survival rifle. This was the first time in history that helicopter shot down a fixed-wing aircraft. Most Americans remember the indelible image of Air America helicopters evacuating the U.S. Embassy in Saigon. Going into the artifacts, top left is Frederick A. Gray Jr.'s hat badge. And I put in 3 different cloth hat patches just to show different construction. The one on the very right belonged to Gordon V. Smith. Full-size air crew ring, sterling, unattributed. Below that top on the left is a full-size captain wing, Frederick A. Gray. Below that, full-size air crew wing, first officer wing of Frederick A. Gray. Below that, full-size air crew wing, unattributed. Below that, kind of in the middle, is a little tie tack. The next wings below the cloth hat badges are captain in command, captain, first officer, and air crew, all in shirt size. These will be worn on shirts, not on the tunic. Down next to the little air crew wing is a garrison cap badge. On the very right is a air crew luggage tag. And below that is not a business card. This was inside Gordon V. Smith's hat. It's cut from a piece of stationery, but it does show the APO for Air America in San Francisco and his address in Vientiane. On the left are 2 tunic buttons. Both of these belong to Frederick A. Gray. Below that is a commemorative medallion honoring Ronald Doc Lewis, who began with CAT in 1946 and served as head of Air America in Japan. On 15 January 1962, he became regional director for Southeast Asia in charge of all Air America operational flying in Laos, Thailand, and South Vietnam. So he was the top dog. On the right is pretty interesting to me. It's a Kingdom of Laos private pilot license to an Air America, Richard K. Burroughs. This is another Riker. The Riker mount is the case that it's in. For people that don't know, if I talk about Rikers, that's what I'm talking about. This is filled with other Air America artifacts. This is a pointy talkie in Lao. It mentions American servicemen. I'm not sure what that's about. It could have been from when American servicemen were still there, but it could have also been used by Air America. Next picture is just the blood chit. This is a blood chit on paper in Laos. It was made by Americans. I received this from an Air America pilot who was there early on. It's a paper blood chit in Laos, made by Americans and given to an Air America pilot. He gave it to me on the condition that I don't disclose his name. And at this point, I can't, because the letter he sent me, I cut his name out with an X-Acto knife, so I would never break my word, even no matter how tempted I am. So, but he was there early. This is in 1961, 62, 63. That's when this blood chit is from. The patch on the top left is a very early Air America patch, belonged to Frederick A. Gray, possibly pre-war. This is made in Taiwan. Below that is a patch made in Thailand, wartime patch. To the right of that, the Flight Crew Southeast Asia Air America patch. I don't know that that's an official patch. This could just be a patch, Thai patch shop patch made for someone. This came from an Air America veteran. Nobody knows his name, but it was on like a motorcycle vest with some other Air America things. At the very bottom, I picked up some 110 slides, which are very small and not in very good focus. So I put them into this film strip so you could at least see the pictures halfway decent. On the left is a C-46. Middle two are people around. The airplane on the right looks like maybe a Fairchild, a tribal woman with a child in an Air America airplane taking off. This next Riker just has a letter in the envelope it came in. It's a letter from Air America to a prospective hire. It requests that forms enclosed be filled out and returned. Unfortunately for me, the forms weren't in the letter. And I'm only keeping this because it really gives Air America's address in Washington and their phone number and their cable. But it's interesting to see how someone would be contacted. This is another Riker mount with some Air America things in it. I'd like to go into some detail. At the top are epaulets, pilot epaulets belonging to Frederick W. Stickle. On the left are khaki-colored ones. On the right are olive-colored ones. Below that are three of his some of his paperwork that he brought back. On the left is a registration card to the Saigon Adventist Hospital. In the center is a pass for access to all South Vietnamese Air Force bases. And on the right is a membership card for the American Consulate, General Recreation and Commissary Association in Da Nang. At the top left here is a patch from Page, which did some maintenance of Air America aircraft in Vietnam. In the center is a hat badge for Air Asia. Air Asia maintained Air America aircraft in Taiwan, and it was actually a holding company for all the hard assets of Air America. To the right is a medallion commemorating the sale of Air Asia to E-Systems in 1975, when the CIA divested its ownership in Air America. At the bottom are two bracelets. The top one is a sweetheart bracelet in sterling. The bottom one is a sterling bracelet with gold that belonged to Brian K. Johnson, who, as I understand it, was the president of the Air America Association at one time.
Bob, do you have anything else in your collection from Air America?
Yeah, I have several other things. This is a peaked visor cap on the top left that belonged to Gordon V. Smith. And on the right is a summer tunic made by Diamond Taylor Saigon, which belonged to Frederick W. Stickle. I really like to put other things besides these flat things in the display cases on exhibits so people can get a better feel of things. Not shown here, I have also have wartime news photos that I like to display of Air America. Then I have novelty patches, which is still about Air America. No work that touches on Americans in Laos would be complete without a few novelty patches. Novelty patches weren't official. They were made, most of them, in Thai patch shops for sale. So I always like to show these. At the top center is a small patch. This would be mostly for U.S. Air Force personnel over the Ho Chi Minh Trail. Top left, available to anyone. The top right really does have Air America connections for people that were in Vientiane. This is the Vientiane Golf and Country Club. Some people think this was a joke. I think it wasn't a joke. There is a golf course at Six Click City where Americans lived. Below that is a Vientiane Rod and Gun Club patch. I think that's a real thing too. The patch in the center is shows Obelisk, a character from the French comic strip Asterisk, holding a couple Air America aircraft on strings. I really love this patch. I've never seen another like it. This belonged to that same Air America person who had these patches on a motorcycle vest. The Golf and Country Club patch also came from him. At the bottom on the left is a Unemployed Fighter Pilot Association patch showing airplanes spinning down. It's for people who lost their aircraft. It has a spilling air, which a lot of patches do. On the right is a pretty unique little patch. It's for the annual Bangkok Vientiane Games between the American School in Vientiane Cobras and the International School of Bangkok Panthers in 1974. This took place towards the end of the year in 1974. Air America was already gone from Laos, and the writing was on the wall with Pathet Lao routinely violating the ceasefire. I like this patch a lot because it shows that American parents and school staff tried to maintain as normal an American life as they could for their children, even though the end of the war was inevitable.
Bob, I know your collection is much bigger than what you're showing here, but could you tell us a little bit about the smoke jumper connection into Air America for the items that you have? Could you tell that story a little bit?
Sure, I'd be happy to. I'm going to go into a little background about intermountain aviation, which is shown in this Riker mount. When the CIA's Bay of Pigs invasion of Cuba became a disaster after President Kennedy suddenly pulled air support, the CIA realized that it needed its own air branch. Intermountain aviation was created and based at Marana, Arizona, outside of Tucson, to fill this need. Here they designed, tested, and perfected aircraft delivery systems. In Laos, Air America and others had to deliver supplies to really remote places they couldn't always land. They had to come up with systems to parachute heavy items in, and a lot of different systems were required to be invented. The CIA had used smoke jumpers since China's invasion of Tibet in 1950. In Laos, they were there as pilots, loadmasters, kickers, and one who actually worked here at Intermountain became a CIA paramilitary operations officer with Dong Pao, the Hmong general at Long Chain, Jerry Hogg Daniels. The smoke jumpers at Marana were perfect for the work because they were trained in delivering people and supplies by aircraft and by parachute. The CIA would come up with certain requirements, and the men working on what was called Riggers Row would implement them. This included designing pallets, necessary internal hardware for the aircraft, and anything else that was needed. Once designed, they would build them, test them in the aircraft, determine weight and balance and maximum load. Once perfected, they would put everything they learned into a manual for the airplane. And once all that was done, airplanes were sent off for use in Laos. They also developed the Fulton Skyhook recovery system. I have yet to find any artifacts for Intermountain, which is no surprise given the clandestine nature of their work. But there are photos of the aircraft, and many of them are types used in Laos by Air America and Air Continental. So I put some photos in here because there seems to be no other way to talk about Intermountain. So at the top is a top left DHC Twin Otter, top right DH4 Caribou, top left C-46. Air America used all three of these. Second row down, right-hand side is a DC-3 or C-47. This is a photo from courtesy of Neil Aird, who actually was there in 1966. He let me use some of his photos. Third one down on the left is a Lockheed L-188. I don't know that was ever used in Laos. DC-6 on the right of that. Bottom left is a U.S. Forest Service T-28. That was at Marana. This is one of Neil's photos in 1966. So whether it had connections to smoke jumpers or not, I don't know. But I had to put that in there because Forest Service and smoke jumpers go together. And on the bottom right is a C-46 being worked on in the shop, another of Neil's photos. These are two of the most important manuals for operating in Laos. On the left is Air Facilities Data. This is an Air America publication. This one's dated June 1972. It looks to me like it would be carried on a pilot's knee pad, just from the size and shape. It had a lot of airfield data, including length, width, radio signal, coordinates, geographic coordinates, a lot of advisory remarks to help the pilot landing there. On the right is an aerial delivery manual, sometimes called a kicker manual. This is the direct result of smoke jumpers working at Marana at Intermountain Aviation. The purpose of the manual, which is an Air America publication, it says is to consolidate operating techniques and procedures in the conduct of aerial delivery operations in Southeast Asia. So all the information learned and developed by the smoke jumpers at Marana were put into this manual. So I think this is one of my favorite things to own, just because it has more. It's more than just Air America. It's actual other people working to make everything possible.
Bob, where did the aerial delivery manual come from? How did you get it?
I was lucky to find this on eBay with some other Air America things that I already had. And so I was just lucky to get it. Sometimes things work out.
That's great. Thanks for sharing it with us. What else do you have?
We're getting down to the end of what I'm going to show today. ICCS Air Services was a branch of Air America. Under the Paris Peace Accords of 1973, the International Commission of Control and Supervision, which is where ICCS comes from, was to supervise the conditions of the Paris Peace Accords, which was supposedly a ceasefire in Laos. Air America and its pilots had a thorough knowledge of Vietnam and Laos, so it formed a subsidiary, ICCS Air Services, to transport commissioners. North Vietnam ignored the accords and set about taking all of Laos and Vietnam, while the U.S. used the accords as an excuse to leave. The ceasefire was a sham, and ICCS was a sham because communist members blocked non-communist members from reporting ceasefire violations. This is really the end of everything. During the first 6 months, there were 18,000 ceasefire violations, resulting in over 76,000 deaths. Canada finally quit the ICCS, stating that they were observing a war, not a ceasefire. And in fact, one Canadian commissioner said that ICCS stood for I can't control shit. ICCS came to an end with the fall of Saigon on 30 April 1975. In a footnote to history, 5 UH-1 Huey helicopters were stolen from the ICCS ramp by South Vietnamese air pilots who flew themselves and local dependents to the safety of Navy ships offshore. So in here is Air America ID card of Frederick W. Stickle. On the left is his captain wing. Below that is his cloth captain wing. On the right is Gordon V. Smith's first officer wing for ICCS. And at the bottom, I just put this letter in the, it was a letter transported on ICCS, but the little blue stamp at the bottom gives the 4 countries who were part of the commission. So this is basically the end of everything. This is we left Laos earlier, we left Vietnam at this time. I like to end my exhibits, and I'll end this with a unit citation that was given to Civil Air Transport and Air American veterans by the CIA on 2nd of June, 2001. The left is the actual unit citation. On the top right is a medallion on a blue neck ribbon commemorating the ceremony and citation that were presented to Civil Air Transport veterans in attendance. Also available at the ceremony, shown below that, were Air America medallions, and they were later available to CAT and Air America veterans online because not everybody could attend the ceremony. 243 on the Air America medallion is considered the accurate count of personnel lost in the Second Indochina War. CAT and Air America tallied 242, but the CIA knew of one more person. Both of these belong to Bob Gorman.
Bob, what else do you have related to this subject?
I have quite a bit. What I've shown here, because it's smoke jumper related, maybe 20% of the collection. I have, I'm not sure naming a bunch of names will mean anything to people who weren't there, but I have Air Continental items. I have a couple of Rikers of Ravenfac items. I have some U.S. Air Force things, forward air controllers and some special operation units that worked in Laos. Some foreign governments that were also in the aerial. Everything I have is basically aviation in Laos. It's just not the whole conflict, just aviation, just the air war. But the foreign governments, the Great Britain flew some supplies into Laos. It was a surprise for me to find. Thailand, of course, provided pilots and did some reconnaissance, so I have some information on that. I have quite a bit of Royal Lao Air Force stuff, which is honestly my favorite of all of it. It's almost impossible to find, and it's really colorful. I did write an article on translating some of the Royal Lao Air Force T-28 squadron patches, confirmed some of the information that was available from the 1980s, but it also corrected one mistake. So, I think we all do our little part to show a bigger picture.
Have you ever shown your collection out publicly?
I have a couple times. In 2019, I took it to Portland, Oregon, and then last year in July, I took it to the Maps Air Museum in Canton, Ohio. But, like I said before, I'm not an authority on this. There are people out there who actually did what we're talking about, and they're the authorities. But I don't know. What I really like is trying to make the public aware of something that most of us know little about. I mean, you heard my story, how I found out. So I hope that this thing we just did will also help spread the word. More people will learn about it and will be interested and start looking things up on their own.
Would you be interested in showing your collection if somebody would like you to do an exhibit?
I'd be happy to do that. I probably need some help if I had to travel.
How could they contact you if someone wanted to contact you about that?
Can they contact me through you?
Sure.
Is
Yeah,
that
sounds good. Okay, Bob. Well, thank you very much for your time. We really appreciate this opportunity to learn more about collecting from that time period and seeing your collection. Thank you for sharing.
Okay. Well, it's great to see you again, Michael. I don't see you often enough.
I agree, Bob. I like you too.
Take care.
You too.
Okay. Bye.
We're doing this for all of you. If you like what we're doing, please give us a thumbs up, hit the subscribe button, and leave a comment below. See you next time.